I maybe started to notice it when she stopped drinking. She had my stepbrother, and then she'd stopped drinking for quite a long time, but I do remember her starting again. And maybe that was a little indication, but I certainly don't remember it having any kind of impact on my childhood at all, actually. It reached a point where my mum couldn't really tolerate me, how I was behaving. She asked me to leave and I was homeless. I went into a homeless shelter. I'd already tried crack at this point and I felt really, really guilty. I remember seeing my mum after. I didn't tell her, of course. My mum asking me to leave was the best thing she could have ever done, I realise now. My relationship with my mum is better than it's ever been.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Ollie. Hi fellow 12 Steppers. Welcome to this new episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. This is the second part of the double episode of a mother and her son in recovery. As I said last week, I hope we can shed a light on how alcoholism or addiction and recovery can affect us within families. So last week we had Sue D share her experience, strength and hope, particularly with regards to how this may have affected her son Ollie, who is with us today. Ollie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Silvio. My name's Ollie. I'm a recovered member of Cocaine Anonymous. I have a sobriety date of the 26th of January 2024. And as he just said, I'm the son of a recovered member, a recovered alcoholic.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, obviously, we're doing this as a double episode, so let's always keep in mind a little bit on how your mother's illness and recovery may have affected your own. This is not to say that that's all we're going to talk about, but I just wanted us both to just share some awareness here around this. So the first of the 12 questions is, Ollie, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
So my early childhood, I was brought up in a single parent family. I don't remember my mum's alcoholism ever having any kind of effect on me early on, especially. I was always provided for. I had everything that I needed. She did an incredible job of bringing me up through times of adversity and. So, but what I do remember, Silvio, quite early on is having this kind of codependency, this real neediness on my mom and on other people as well. Early friendships, things like that. This real need to have people close to me. I'm kind of feeling a bit, that feeling that I hear so many people describe, kind of feeling a bit separate and yearning to be accepted. That was definitely present early on.
When you say early on, how early on?
Probably 5, 6 years old.
Did that sort of accompany you into your school days, and how did that affect you maybe a little bit later on, 8, 9, 10? Yeah,
definitely, and throughout my adulthood, of course. So I think it manifested itself in quite intense, relationships with people. A bit later on, as I got a bit older, I started to get bullied, and that continued throughout my kind of adolescence as well. But I think it was that intense desire to be part of a kind of social group and be accepted. But even when I was accepted, I didn't really feel comfortable. So I never really felt like I fitted in.
It's funny that, isn't it? When I remember this really clearly, and I was speaking with Luke about bullying just a few episodes ago, and how deep those wounds can go, It affected me deeply, thankfully for not too long, but there was a year or so, maybe a bit more, where I was bullied, and it really wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun. But also, as you were saying just now, and this is a dichotomy I've come across so many times in recovery and in our illness, is even when you then are accepted and you've found a few friends, and really, theoretically, everything should just be fine, right? Because you have those friends and everything. Somehow, I'm just speaking for myself here, I still then wanted to be part of someone else or something else. I didn't want to belong. But the moment I was not accepted, I wanted to belong, if that makes sense, right? So it's a bit of a lose-lose in many ways, and a bit bonkers, you know. Did you experience it similarly, or was it different for you?
No, but very much like that, Silvio. And another thing that's come to mind was this. You know, I had a lot of irrational fears. So one of the biggest ones was about the toilets at school, and I was absolutely terrified about these toilets at school at primary school. So much so that I wouldn't go, and you know, I'd wet myself a lot. You know, that happened repeatedly. Almost on a daily basis, actually, and also loud noises. I was very sensitive to noise, and still can be today. But also, I had a lot of irrational fears, but also I was quite fearless in other areas. So I remember playing this game where I'd jump off the 4th step, and then it'd be the 5th step, and then right to the top of the stairs. You know, so sometimes I'd injure myself, but I'd go back and do it. There was another incident where I was on this climbing frame, and I think I'd snuck out. I wasn't really meant to be playing. I was on my own, and I jumped off this climbing frame, and I had this baggy t-shirt on, and it caught on this bit of wood, and I was hanging. I was kind of choking to death. But luckily, by the grace of God, I realised now that there was two men walking past, and they kind of unhooked me. So that was quite a traumatic experience early on, but. You know, that need for excitement was there as well, you know.
You say your mum's alcoholism at this point in your life was invisible to you, using different words. And when was the first time do you find that it then appeared? It was not in your childhood? Was it when you were an adult already?
I think I maybe started to notice it when actually she stopped drinking. She had my stepbrother. And then she'd stopped drinking for quite a long time, but I do remember her starting again, and maybe that was a little indication. But I certainly don't remember it having any kind of impact on my childhood at all. Actually,
here you are experiencing life quite intensely. Something I can really relate to. I felt, you know, around my childhood and up until at some point I find hard to determine. You know, I felt everything incredibly intensely. Everything was really intense. My emotions were really, really strong at all times. I think that's the way, maybe a better way or another way of expressing this. And perhaps this is one of the many reasons why I ended up wanting to, well, either switch them off or change them, really, right? Our question 2 is, what did the moment you first got hooked, the fun times, what did that look like? So, you know, you're someone who experienced things quite intensely. You were bullied for a long time. It's a very, very difficult experience for anyone. At some point, something comes into your life that changes this. How did that come about?
Okay, so the first time I actually had a drink, I was 8 years old. I was at my mum and stepdad's wedding. I was under the table and drinking Bucks Fizz or whatever it was. And I distinctly remember feeling, you know, it's really stuck in my mind that feeling. And you know, I was with the other adults, and everyone else was a bit drunk, you know. And I definitely remember feeling something that day, and definitely enjoying it. Of course, I didn't drink again for a while because I know, you know, back in the day, the kind of laws on ID were lax, but they weren't that relaxed, you know. So it wasn't until I was, I think, 13 or 14, and I believe, I mean, my memory's pretty hazy, but I believe I smoked weed before I started drinking again. And you know what? I didn't really it was that whole thing again of kind of wanting to fit in. But by this point, I'd moved from Cambridge, so I grew up in Cambridge. I moved to Sheffield when I was about 9 or 10, and that instantly put me in a situation where I felt even more separate because I spoke differently. You know, I was from a different place, and the bullying that we talked about got worse. But in a lot of respects, I kind of allowed that to happen. So smoking weed, I didn't really enjoy the effects that much to begin with, but I kind of persevered with it because I wanted to be cool and I wanted to fit in. I did prefer the effect produced by alcohol, definitely, but quite quickly I realized that because I'd smoked weed in a social situation, and I feel really sketchy and really paranoid and quite uncomfortable. But I realized that if I drank and then smoked weed, the drink would kind of temper that kind of paranoia. And another thing to note is from very early on, I quite liked using on my own. In fact, I preferred smoking weed on my own. If I was just smoking weed, I'd always need the alcohol to kind of temper that kind of effect. And then the two combined was quite powerful, you know.
So you're what, 13, 14 or something like that, and you sort of, or maybe a bit older, and you know, you're by yourself, rolling up, lighting up, having a few beers with it, just by yourself, just you.
Not all the time. Sometimes, you know, sometimes. Yeah. But I preferred it like that. Certainly. And then there was an incident when I was about 14 where I got pretty seriously beaten up. But you know, I know today that happened because I was, how would I put this? I kind of went along with a situation that I should have stood up to, you know. That culminated in me being pretty seriously beaten up. I had my nose broke. It was of course traumatic. And after that happened, I think my drinking and drug use certainly accelerated. I started having what I know today a panic attack. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was having panic attacks at school a lot.
I'll just stop you there for a sec. When you say panic attacks, were they the full-on kind, the earth-shaking ones, the ones where you think you're going to die?
Absolutely, yeah. They tended to happen when I was in class, and I'd just get this feeling rise up within me. You know, I'd start feeling really, really panicky. My heart would be pounding out my chest, and I'd just have this overwhelming desire to get out of that situation.
I've had panic attacks in pretty much all my life, really, I suppose, but in varying degrees. And just a word about them, really, for anyone who might just be, I know this is entirely off script, but for anyone who might be suffering from panic attacks, you know, I felt at the time that, I mean, when they were really bad, it was like you think you're going to die. You know, you are convinced either that you're going to have a heart attack or something, or you're mad or something like that. And it is a really, really awful feeling. They're entirely harmless, but you don't know that then, do you? You know, just wanted to address those very quickly. They're close to my heart in many ways because of that. You know, and a good round of CBT really does make a difference with cognitive behavioral therapy. Really does make quite a difference for if you're suffering, dear listener, from anxiety, from panic attacks in particular, the really strong ones. Just thought I'd sort of bracket that very quickly, if you don't mind. So you were really going through it at this time, though, weren't you? I mean, you're a young kid still. We're 14, 15, 16. Did you understand if there was a relationship between the way you were feeling and the way you were using and drinking? Was there any sort of bridge that you were thinking that you could make that connection between the two?
I don't think consciously. I think after that incident, I believe that I just had to carry on, and you know that I was okay. I didn't understand what a panic attack was, but you know, I kind of went to school less and less after that. I was less and less interested in school, but I was definitely starting to use drink and weed as a kind of crutch, you know. But part of this friendship group that was really quite. We were all pretty out of control, especially at the time. You know, as that progression starts, you know, it was getting certainly the weekends, they were getting quite debauched. It's getting pretty malty there.
If we circle back to the question just a little bit, my fault that we went in the other direction, but still, if we could quickly go back to the original question, which is, what did the moment you first got hooked, the fun times look like? Were there fun times?
Oh, of course there was. There was. I think certainly a bit later on, 16, 17, 18, where I started going out more. I kind of had this. I couldn't wait until I turned 18 and I could drink, properly in the pubs, and I'd look at people that were talking about sitting in the pub all day, and I think, that sounds amazing. I can't wait until I can do that. It was all quite exciting, hanging around on the street corners, asking people to get drink for us. Buying the weed was always quite nerve-wracking, but exciting in itself. There were, but really, certainly when I turned 18 and I had that first line of cocaine, that was when it was almost like a key in a lock. It kind of opened this completely different world, and I absolutely loved it. And the first time I did cocaine, I did quite a lot of it, and it wasn't particularly glamorous. It was just me and my mate sat in his parents' bedroom. Nothing great about it. It's all just chatting apps. I thought, wow, I can drink more. I can talk a lot about myself, which is my favorite subject. Just gave me this real confidence, and I just felt so alive. And I did realize that what I was doing wasn't particularly good and pretty frowned upon, but I thought, well, it's not that bad. I remember coming down after and I thought, well, this doesn't feel too good, but it's just a trade-off for feeling that good. And after that, ecstasy came along, and again, the first time I did ecstasy, I took quite a lot, and I remember actually looking at this wall, and there was flowers all over the wall, so it's kind of like, properly hallucinating. I'd taken that much. So from the word go, I had very little control over the amount I took.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, when we sort of progress towards certain things and certain drugs and substances or behaviors, and we find those that really seem to unlock something we think in us, but really what it is just it does something to us that we can't do for ourselves, right? So you were able to speak about yourself, you were able to speak more freely, you were able to just connect a bit better by the sound of it. And it sounds a bit like, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I'm just trying to sum this up a little bit. It just seemed to connect you to the world in a better way, in a more effective way, almost.
Yeah, it's that whole thing. Drinking drugs did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I couldn't manufacture confidence from within. It had to come from that, and really, I kind of turned. I turned my life over to the care of drinking drugs quite early on. They were what I put all my kind of faith into to kind of produce this effect and this sense of belonging that I'd always wanted. But the problem is it's artificial and it doesn't last. There's always consequences. I know that will come on to the consequences.
It's a different kind of step 3, isn't it? Really, I made a decision to turn our lives over to the care of cocaine. Is certainly also what I did, and it came back to bite me. So, our question 3 is: what were your worst consequences, and finally your rock bottom, if you had one? So, talk to us a bit, in other words, about the progression of your illness. From the fun times, things were good, you could connect, you took a whole lot of pills and, it was all good fun. Did like the come downs, nobody does, but, quote unquote, this is quite harmless. It isn't really, but it looks harmless. How did it progress?
So I chose a kind of career that allowed me to be around alcohol and drugs. So I chose to be a chef. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in life, as a lot of us, really, really don't. But from early on, I was in and out of jobs. I could never really hold a job down. I was really good at talking myself into a job, but I would always talk and behave myself out of the job pretty quick. Normally when I got paid, But there was an incident when I think I was 18 or 19, where I committed a crime. I burgled someone's house when I was under the influence of a lot of alcohol, a lot of cocaine, and a lot of ecstasy. And I very, very nearly went to jail. Very, very nearly went to jail. It was kind of a miracle that I didn't go to jail. I think it was only the fact that I had, a solid kind of family around me, and of course, to kind of acknowledge the effect that had on my mum and my stepdad, and my brother, of course. My mum went into hospital. My mum went into hospital because she had a problem with her heart, and that was really down to the stress that I'd caused from that incident. So I very narrowly avoided jail. I got community service and a big fine and a lovely ankle bracelet to wear for a few months. So that that was the first really big consequence. And that kept me off the drugs that I'd used that time for a while. I just thought, well, I won't use that stuff, but I'll just drink and smoke weed in the cellar. And for me that was all right. I was kind of doing better then, but the memory of that incident and the kind of trauma around it and all the harm and the guilt and the blame, etc., that faded after a while, and of course I went back to it. So my kind of life progressed through many dead-end jobs that I couldn't keep down. I knocked my front two teeth out, so I was running up a hill with loads of beer in my hands, and I saved the beer and didn't save my teeth.
Oh man!
Went a bit of a scrap, and someone punched me. I was in complete blackout. Someone punched me, and my tooth, one of my bottom teeth went straight through my lip. So that required 30 stitches because it was all the way through my lip. That was a pretty bad consequence. And yeah, just ruined relationships. Really, really putting my mum through it. Her not understanding.
Where was your mum's alcoholism at this point? Did you notice? If you didn't notice, maybe it wasn't somewhere problematic for you. But, what is there any sort of crossover at this point, or none whatsoever?
Yeah, I think during this time there was times where we'd drink and smoke weed together. So yeah, definitely. But I think really, Silvio, because I was so selfish and self-centered, I couldn't really see what was going on around. I knew I was causing my mom, a hell of a lot of trouble and hassle, but I was more concerned about, how angry she was with me and what effect that'd have on me rather than what effect I was having on her.
You didn't think her drinking was problematic at that time, is what I'm hearing.
Not really. No, I didn't think it was. But it definitely was. Looking back, it was. But
it was your normal, I suppose.
Yeah. And my alcoholic life and drug addled life was normal to me. So,
I mean, the book has the brilliant phrase, doesn't it? That to the alcoholic, his alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And so I suppose if you've got another person who's just like you around you, you think that their life and your life are the only normal ones.
Yeah, definitely. So it reached a point where my mum couldn't really tolerate me, how I was behaving. So she kicked me out. I'd met a girl at this point. So we moved to London because she really wanted to move to London, and that's where my drinking and using, took off even more. Progressed even more because I kind of had the freedom. I caused that girl a lot of harm. Again, I couldn't really keep a job down in London. I was working as a chef. A lot of the kitchens are fueled by alcohol and cocaine. So that suited me quite
famously.
Yeah, but I think at this point, this is when that kind of spiritual malady the spiritual sickness was really starting to take a hold. Externally, we were doing quite well. I had a friendship group, I had a girlfriend. We lived in a really nice part of London. We were earning quite good money between us. We were going out for meals all the time, drinking all the time, of course. And she didn't really take any drugs, but I was doing a lot of cocaine in kind of secret a lot of the time. But there was points where I just have these kind of emotional breakdowns, and I really felt that kind of that inner kind of turmoil and kind of desperation and.
Did these come when you were drunk and when you were using, or did they come when you weren't drunk and using, those breakdowns?
Both, really. I think when I was drinking and using it, they came out a lot more kind of, I was able to express it better. But when I wasn't, it just manifested itself in me being really, really miserable and not being very nice to be around, and kind of manipulate situations where we could go and drink so I could feel better.
I remember the last sort of maybe year or so of my drinking and using were characterized by really wanting to stop on the one hand, and then whenever I was drinking, I'd end up in these really awful sort of just bawling my eyes out, even when the friends were there and all the rest of it. It was just really intense, and then I'd wake up the next day kind of going, oh God, what have I done? This is really stupid, and return and rinse and repeat, really. So I can relate to quite a lot of that. And did you stay in London, or did you move back up north?
So we stayed in London for about 4 years. Eventually, I became too ill to kind of stay in London.
Yeah.
But it was a very snap decision. But I'm very good at being really reactive, and I thought I can't do this anymore. As I said before, I'd caused this girl a lot of harm. I've been quite abusive psychologically. But I will admit there was 2 occasions where I was physically abusive as well, while intoxicated. So things weren't great at all.
Did you think of yourself as having a problem at that time, a drug and alcohol problem?
She used to say to me, I think you've got a drinking problem and a drug problem. I could see that life wasn't going particularly well, and I wasn't feeling great, but I thought it was all to do with my mental health, nothing to do with drugs and alcohol.
As if they are not connected.
2 separate things, Silvio, in my mind. And maybe there's some truth in that, but so I moved back up to Sheffield, moved back in with my mum, and things kind of rapidly declined even further after that. I started gambling a lot. I started going to casinos. In the book it says we seek out sordid places. I started doing that. I felt desperately lonely. I was quite upset that the relationship kind of ended, even though it was really I was to blame in that situation, of course. But of course there was some sadness. I got a job that didn't last too long. And yeah, it kind of, my drinking and using got worse.
Can I just ask you for a second? You talk about gambling, and we haven't had enough of that in our podcast. I'm just wondering if you'd care to enlighten me a little bit about your gambling and what that looked like. I know it's not your primary, well, I'm assuming it's not your primary, for as far as I know, it's not your primary addiction, but still, it did something for you. And I've spoken here about the fact that I overate for a long, long time, particularly when I wasn't drinking and using in my 30s and 40s, and it was a real issue. So there is some scope here to talk about the things that might not be our primaries, but that still have affected us, and we went to in times of, I'm going to try something else. So what kind of gambling did you do?
I loved being in a casino. I mean, I'd gambled a bit over the years, but never that much. It's never been a real issue. But so certainly going to casinos, playing roulette on my phone, going in bookies, all of it really. The whole lot.
Did you lose a lot of money?
I did, and I also stole a lot of money to fuel that kind of addiction from my mom. I stole a debit card and a credit card, and spent a lot of her money. Spent a lot of my own money. But there was something about being in a dark, dingy casino, drinking and using cocaine and gambling that was just so intoxicating that I just couldn't leave, and I just wanted to do it again and again.
How long did that last for? I mean, I know that when we drink and use, sometimes we like to indulge in other behaviours simply because we want to up the ante. A bit of a pun there. I didn't intend, a gambling pun, but didn't intend on. So, but nonetheless, because I wanted to sort of experience things more intensely or whatever it is. So, we were speaking about gambling. Porn, of course, is another big one. Escorts. There's all sorts of things that we get up to once we start drinking and using. So you really liked being in this intense place where you're drinking, you're using. It's all a bit of rock and roll. It's all a bit dingy, and you're gambling at the same time. I mean, the come down I'm imagining from that, having lost X amount, that isn't even your own money. And then plus the usual come down from drinks and cocaine must have been so incredibly intense.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was really, really, so full of self-pity and so depressed and anxious and guilty and all those things. How long did it last? I can't really remember. Quite a few months. A bit, and I was a bit on and off with it. I remember one time my mum finding out that I'd stolen all this money off her card and feeling really, really bad about that. And I didn't do it for a while, but then I did do it again. I went back to it. So yeah, a little while, but I was able to stop on my own power. But really, this is where it kind of goes into the crack and heroin days. It was because I couldn't afford to drink and use how I wanted to. So at this time I was still living with my mom. It was really chaotic, really, really destroying her life and destroying my own life, of course. But it got to the point where she couldn't tolerate me, so she asked me to leave, and I was homeless. I went into a homeless shelter. I'd already tried crack at this point, and again, this is a point where, I was out one night with an old friend, drinking buddy really, and I just upped and left because I really wanted to get some coke. I couldn't get hold of any cocaine, so I walked to these dingy flats in Sheffield. Saw these two girls, and I knew that they were going to score something, and I asked them. And I was quite happy to try crack for the first time, And again, it was like that first line of cocaine. As soon as I had that first hit of that pipe, wow, absolutely blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. And afterwards, I felt really, again, crack's far less socially acceptable than powdered cocaine, of course. And I felt really, really guilty. I remember seeing my mom after. I didn't tell her, of course. But there was this little voice in my mind, that was like, you're going to do that again. But I knew at this point, Silvio, that I'd crossed the line that was going to be very, very difficult to come back from. So my mom made me homeless. No, she didn't make me homeless. I made myself homeless, of course.
And she spoke of her struggle in doing that in the episode that we recorded, about how difficult that was. And I think we acknowledged that this must be the most difficult step for any parent, to let go of their children and say, I'm no longer going to look after you when, you're hardwired to do only that. Your entire being as a parent, screams for that. So it must have been, and it was by her, the way she was speaking about it, it was very difficult for her. How did it progress then? I mean, you're speaking of crack, obviously, but you also went into heroin. So this is a different bottom, I suppose, if we can call it that, than the one you'd experienced beforehand. If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
It was. My mum asking me to leave was the best thing she could have ever done, actually. I realise now. I landed in this homeless hostel. And actually, in my very sick mind, I thought, well, this is all right. I can do what I want.
Yeah, you can use it as you want. Yeah,
exactly. And I did. The crack use. There was a drug dealer on site, which was very handy. And I did smoke a lot of crack. I really started hammering the drink. And heroin, followed quite closely. Not long into that. I'd only been there a few weeks and I'd started smoking heroin. I'd already dabbled with like tablets, like codeine-based tablets and stuff. So I roughly knew what the effect would be. But again, it just did exactly what I wanted it to at that time. It just took me out of that situation, and also, I started to realize that the crack can make you really, really paranoid. So I'd smoke crack and I'd smoke a bit of brown to calm down, And quickly, heroin takes grip of you so quickly. I was kind of addicted, really, really quite quickly.
Physically addicted.
Yeah, physically addicted, exactly. Psychologically, I loved it from the word go.
Yeah.
That first time smoking, I fell in love with it. I really did. But also, what I was doing, there was a guy in there. He's dead now. From this illness, but I'd already started kind of getting a bit of methadone off him, so I knew what methadone did, and it lasts a lot longer. So I was quite happy to go on a methadone script. So I thought, well, I don't really want to have to be doing all the things that I see other people doing to get heroin, and I lied about how much I was using when I went to the drug service. I lied because I wanted more. And I've, kind of enhanced effect from the methadone. So I lied about how much I was using to get more methadone, because I just wanted to feel that kind of complete detachment all the time, and that's what it did for a little while until my body kind of got used to it, and then I was using heroin on top of methadone. It got a bit messy.
Now, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but it sounds like a very, very, very sad existence. Living to use, using to live, sort of a thing,
Yeah.
How did you, from that point of, being extremely ill, not having contact with your mother, I've got two questions really for you. One, did at any point in this time you think about the fact that your mother was also an alcoholic, also ill? Did that occur to you? And two, how did you then come into the rooms?
So again, because I was so focused on myself, I kind of had this inability to really think about what was going on with my mom. She was in a relationship, by her own admission, quite challenging. But I think because I was the way I was, and I was, quite far down the line at this point. Her drinking and smoking weed didn't seem that significant.
Yeah.
But I know now it really doesn't matter what drug or how much you're drinking. It's that that internal suffering that we have, and she really was. But I was just so blind to it because I completely blocked off. I almost had this inability to have any love in my heart for anyone. Or anything apart from, alcohol and crack and heroin and weed as well.
Very sad.
Very selfish.
From this point, I mean, the book, of course, speaks of how dark it is before the dawn. How did you find the rooms from here? Because it's pretty bad where you are.
So after that, I got a council flat in Sheffield, and my life carried on very much the same. I got my flat taken over by drug dealers, and those people, using and dealing out of my flat. That was another kind of low. But none of this was enough to stop me, of course. So I stayed in that flat for a few years, just on methadone and doing all the same stuff. And then I switched from methadone to this drug called Subutex, which is another opiate replacement, but it's a lot less sedating. So from then, my drinking actually increased then, and I couldn't use while I was on that because it kind of blocks the effects. And I did try and it just didn't do anything. So to kind of get that sedation that I was so used to, I started drinking really, really heavily at that point. From the first day of switching over, I drank really, really heavily. There was other stuff as well, like Xanax and other benzos and pregabalin as well. I was taking a lot of stuff.
I was going to say, you really were in the throes of it all at this point. And the alcohol reading, of course, the famous alcohol reading that we read in Cocaine Anonymous about, alcohol just moving in as a sort of, even if you're, well, as a fail-safe almost, when everything else isn't available, or, you've made a decision like I did to stop using cocaine, and your drinking just really escalates to a point that I never thought was possible before with me, so yeah. And how did it progress?
So I started drinking really, really heavily. That's when I really got a physical dependence on alcohol. And I was still dabbling with crack now and again, but I'd go into psychosis. I didn't know I was in psychosis at the time because we don't, but it definitely was now that I know what that is. And it got very, very dark, but in my mind, even though my mom had gone into the rooms and was in recovery at this point, and we kind of had sporadic contact now and again, I just believed that I needed separating from the opiates and the alcohol, and that I'd be all right, that I didn't need anything else. And I thought, well, my mum's doing this thing all about God and that, and I thought that's fair enough, but I don't really need that. So I did. Eventually, I got a detox. I left that flat, and my first alcohol detox wasn't that bad. I quite enjoyed it, and I thought towards the end, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to be all right, But I'd agreed to go into this treatment center that's part of a different fellowship, and I went there. I was still on Subutex. I was on this injectable form that lasts like a month. So I went there. I didn't start any of the work. I'd been separated from alcohol, and I was just holding on. I was just going to a few meetings, and it was really, really painful. Really, really painful. I was pretending I was okay to my mom, trying to give her a bit of hope. But she knew I was going to drink again, and I lasted there a month, and I did drink again. And then I was very fortunate that my mum paid for me to go to a different treatment center, one where they just talk about the big book. So I went there, and my first experience was, I walked in broken and desperate. And you'll know a bit about this because you did sponsor me for a short period of time. So, I was really desperate, and I started going through the work. Kind of the mistakes I made was that I didn't really ask questions when I didn't understand things. I made all the classic kind of errors of, buying loads of clothes and stuff like that, getting a new Berghaus jacket, and my ego rebuilt pretty quick. And then about 6 weeks in, I decided to get involved with a girl, thinking that was a really good idea after 6 weeks in treatment. And my ego at this point was massive. I'm bouncing around the treatment center, giving people advice. People are saying, "Oh, you've got this," and I'm thinking, "Yeah, I have got this." Even though technically I'm homeless, I'm in a treatment center. I'm still incredibly unwell, dying of untreated alcoholism and addiction. And I left, and I relapsed, and kind of burnt my life to the ground again.
So question 4, just on the back of that, is, at your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
Yeah, many times. There was probably two serious attempts on my own life where I did really want to die, and they were overdoses. there was a lot of self-harm as well. But I won't go into detail around that. But there was other points where there was this bridge in Sheffield, and it was over like a roundabout, and I'd go and stand on this ledge, and it wasn't big at all, and I'd stand there and like, you know, I did really want to jump. I really wanted to jump, and that happened twice. But I know that kind of God was there. That was the thing that stopped me.
Yeah. Let's at this point just also very quickly acknowledge something crucially important. Listener, dear listener, if you are in that space right now, if you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling like the world would be better off without you, that the people who love you don't need you anymore, all those sort of things, please speak up. Say something to someone. There is help. There is hope. I always do this, but I'm just wanting to point this out here at this point. The telephone number of the suicide prevention helpline in there, and you honestly just get in touch with anyone, get help. It doesn't have to be this way, and no one is going to be better off with you not being around. I want to be really, really clear about this, because our illness takes us to that space, and it's very sad. It's really, really sad, but it doesn't have to be that way. There is a solution about which we're talking now. So thank you for sharing that. Now, question 5, and we sort of touched on it just very quickly though. What other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms? I mean, it didn't sound like you didn't want to be sober for a little while, or for quite a long while, by the sound of it. But did you try a few things, and what did you try?
I did. I tried going in the gym. I tried non-alcoholic beer, which, you know, I now know is made for non-alcoholic people. I used to go to this kind of place in Sheffield that was a kind of recovery hub place, and they used to do like knitting, and I don't know if you've ever seen a grown man knitting full of resentment, but I'm sure it was quite a sight to behold, you know. I tried distracting myself. When I was in London, I tried to kind of moderate my drinking by drinking real ale, dressing like a real ale drinker, growing my beard, getting a jumper, stuff like that. Because I thought, well, if I'm drinking these kind of fancy real ales, then it's not as bad. But of course, I was going for the ones that were like 7-8%. Names like monkey piss or whatever. So yeah, and I tried coming off methadone, just stopping my methadone, and that was incredibly painful.
Not recommended.
Definitely not recommended. Get a reduction plan. All sorts of things, really. You know, trying to distract myself, relationships. You know, moving around.
Geographical.
Yeah, I did a couple of those. Always thinking that, you know, I just needed to get out of a particular area, and that was the problem. You know, not realizing I am the problem. I'm the maker of all my own problems.
Now, you came into the rooms, and you were speaking about your first treatment center, and then about the second one, which was a big book treatment center, or a 12-step treatment center. When you came in, and when you first got involved with the steps, did you struggle, question 6, with the word God?
I didn't struggle with saying the actual word. I didn't have an issue with that because everyone else was saying it. I think I struggled with my conception of God. You know, I was very much keen to know what other people's conception was, and didn't believe. I know there's a question about steps later on, but you know, I didn't believe that my conception was good enough. You know, I thought I needed to believe like other people believed. You know, there's a big book about that, isn't there, in agnostics. So I was definitely considering other people's conception of God. But no, I didn't. I certainly didn't have a problem with the word God.
Or with the idea of a spiritual solution?
No. But I you know, any connection that I did make with God's, you know, early on in that first stay was quickly lost when I when I kind of, got involved with a girl, and she became my higher power. And what I mean by that is that how I felt about myself was all dependent on how things were going with her.
Yeah,
So she was my higher power, so I was completely blocked off.
Yeah, and that is something that, making things your higher power, that really shouldn't be, that can happen to any of us and to all of us very, very quickly, so it's really something to look out for. Our question 7, how do you experience your higher power today?
I see God in nature. I see God. I live really near the sea, and when I go down to the beach, I'm just kind of almost overwhelmed by the creation of the world and nature. It blows my mind. I was looking out the window this morning. There's just a little bird like doing its thing. I'm thinking this is incredible. This deep connection with nature and how everything coexists so beautifully. I see God in other people. I see God in taking lads through the work and seeing them recreate their lives, and something starts happening. I was working with a lad the other day, and we were going through step 2, and then he just came out with some of the most amazing things. And just seeing something happen, and they kind of the way that they kind of carry themselves and the way that they speak changes. I see God in outside of this program. I was traveling the other day, and I was a disabled woman getting off the train, and this man was so keen to help, and it was really, and that feeling, I'm awake to these things today, and it produces this really nice effect inside that I can't really explain.
The warm fuzzy feeling.
Yeah, and then I was going to tell a story about, I do a bit of voluntary work at the moment, in this really nice little well-being cafe, and there's 2 women there, and they were really close when they were younger, but they both went their separate ways. One of them moved to France, but this little cafe brought them back together because one of them, her husband died, and then she moved back to the UK, and they were brought together. They'd gone on such different paths, but God brought them together. And it was, such. I remember getting really, really emotional when I heard that story. And that power of God bringing people together. I see God in other people far more than I do myself.
Lovely, thank you. Our question 8: which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I touched on this earlier. I think that first time in treatment, it was definitely step 2 and step 3 actually that was the issue. Really not understanding that step 2 is a process that as time goes on, we come to believe
gradually.
Yeah, it's a process as I go through the rest of the work. It's not a one time. I thought it was a one-time deal, and I saw all these other people really lit up with God, and I didn't feel that as much, and I felt inadequate, and I wanted it now. I was kind of treating it like a crack pipe. I wanted that hit of God's, straight away.
It is something that I've also found difficult before I did my second set of steps. I also it's a beginner's mistake in one way or another, I think, and it's okay, as long as we're working earnestly. I mean, I'm not saying we should make mistakes, but we're going to, so, we can rectify them, right? So we are all going to make mistakes, and it's not something that you have to. I also thought you kind of get this as an event, here it is, you get this, it's like a bing, a light shines somewhere, and then there you have it, right? And even though I the wording is quite obvious, came to believe sounds like a gradual process, but gradual could be anything from 5 seconds to 5 years. I mean, so I also thought with step 3 in particular that it was like a one-time decision. So meet my sponsor, go through the prayer, talk about it, this, that, and the other, fine, great, and the next thing I do is I run off into a bazillion directions and just, as we say, take my will back, right? Didn't really quite get that it's a daily thing to do. You have to do this every single day. I really didn't get that. Or maybe I didn't. I just wasn't able to. I don't know, but it's something I can really relate to. Steps 2 and 3 are so profound, that we don't really realize it. I think when we take them at first, how truly profound they are. Thank you. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Definitely judgment, thinking that I know better. Because I'm quite judgmental around this program. I'm very much, if it's not in the big book, I'm not really interested. But 11 and a bit months in, I'm probably a bit too judgmental about what other people are doing rather than looking at what I'm doing. I'm definitely thinking I know what people should be doing, and all that's kind of a step 3 problem, isn't it? I can still be very critical of myself, and think that I'm not doing well enough. I should be doing this. I should be further along. This kind of self criticism, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah. Can I just ask? I mean, when we're talking about the steps, or question 8, which parts of the steps were most difficult for you, and 9, which character defects give you most trouble? Did you, when you were going through the steps and you had your sponsor and so on, did you feed off, quote unquote, your mum's recovery a little bit? Did you speak to her about it, or not at all? It was just something that you did with your sponsor, and your mum wasn't really all that involved. Did you benefit from her recovery in one way or another, apart from the obvious way of benefiting from someone else's recovery?
Yeah, from very early on, we've been quite open about our recovery. We have to be careful not to give each other too much advice around things. That could definitely cause conflict. I'm not my mum's sponsor and she's not my sponsor, but we do talk a lot about this program, and I think it's beautiful that we have this common kind of bond, and me and my mum are incredibly similar, and our approach to recovery is very, very similar as well. So that's really good, and we learn from each other's experiences and mistakes, if you want to call them that. I think it's a really good thing, but there's certainly kind of lines that we have to be careful not to cross.
Absolutely. And it sounds, maybe I'm pushing the boat out a bit too far here, and if I do, please tell me, but it sounds as if you didn't have that much awareness around your mum's struggle with drink and drugs, but you have a lot more awareness around her recovery, I suppose because you were drowning in your own drink and drug problem at the time, you don't really have space for someone else's. But it sounds as if your recoveries are going somewhat a bit more hand in hand, or there's more awareness around that. Let's just say that. Definitely,
yeah, there is. I definitely realise now how much my mum was suffering. I could see it a bit. I could see it a bit, definitely. We do have, however far down the line we've gone, we still have, some awareness of what we're kind of doing to the person and what they're going through. It's just quite relief.
Without getting into any details, of course, but I'm assuming you made your amends to her and the other way around. So there must have been a step 9 between the two of you, or 2 step 9s, I suppose.
There was, yeah. My amends to my mum, I made the mistake of kind of putting it off. I went down to Sheffield. I think it was on the Thursday, and I didn't make the amends till the Sunday because I was full of fear, and it was only through prayer that I was able to kind of pluck up the kind of courage to do it. But it was an absolutely amazing experience. And her amends to me was the same. It was really, really beautiful and really emotional, but so freeing for both of us. And that's what an amends is. Like, it's stop that to kind of for me to stop resenting that person, but also for them to stop resenting me.
I'm assuming your mum made her amends to you when you were sober.
She did. But she did make an amends while I was still out there drinking and using.
Right.
But I can't really remember what was said, because I was on methadone and drinking and whatever else. So well, I think she we did chat about that, and she said, maybe I shouldn't have really made that amends at that time, because she was obviously locked off and so unwell at the time.
It's an incredibly complex question, really, isn't it? And one where I don't think anyone could lay down a rule for that kind of thing. That has to be really taken into consideration with your sponsor and everybody. And and this is sometimes why we need sponsors, and we need those people around us to give us advice, because it's not always straightforward. Step 9 isn't straightforward anyway, because there's that caveat in there, isn't there? But unless we injure themselves or others, so injure them or others. So really complex stuff in parts, Thank you, Oliver. It's really interesting. I found that really, really interesting. Question 10. What is the best thing recovery has given you?
So much. Our kind of material world rebuilds itself almost, or automatically, doesn't it? When we're not drinking and using, we get a bit of money in our pocket, we're able to pay our bills, etc., etc. So that stuff isn't so important for me. Of course, connection with other people. This calm and peace and kind of contentness that I have most of the time, not all the time. Well, it's still really early days for me. It's such a gift, to be invited to do things like this. To be invited to speak at meetings. To be able to devote a little bit of my spare time to help other people recreate their lives. That is such a gift. It really is such a gift. My relationship with my mom is better than it's ever been. It really is. Even though we don't live that close, and physically we don't see each other that much. We have this deep connection now, which is really lovely. I've built up this fellowship around me that I crave. I have quite a small circle of people who I trust. I have a deep trust, and they understand me, and that is such a wonderful thing. And I kind of have this sense of belonging in Cocaine Anonymous that really I was seeking throughout my life. Drinking drugs, this wanting to be accepted and feeling a part of something, that I never achieved until I came into the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. It absolutely blows my mind. I'm far less fearful now. I know that there's a plan. I'm not in control of that. But when things don't go my way, I'm not always all right with it, but certainly. Through reflection and step 10, and I have a program that is designed for life and all its trials and tribulations. And there's been difficult times in my recovery, but I've overcome them, and it's never been an option to pick up a drink or a drug, which just absolutely blows my mind every single day.
Lovely, thank you. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
I say this quite a lot in meetings. However dark and desperate and lonely your life has become, there is a way out. The people that I see from my short time of being in this program that I see do well are the ones that get through the work pretty quick, because my desperation shouts louder than the kind of delusion. For it doesn't shout louder than that for very long. I have a short window of opportunity where I'm desperate enough to get into the work and then recover. So I always advise people to get through the work thoroughly but quickly. Because I want to get to that solution. I want to get to God quickly. There's qualifying questions. If when you start can you kind of control the amount that you take? And also, when you really want to stop, can you stay stopped? If you answer no to those questions, then you're probably an alcoholic or a drug addict. But, there's this beautiful life available. It's far beyond anything that I could ever have imagined. What was the bit of the question?
Well, it's two questions in one, really. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict? And I think you've answered it also with, making sure that, when you speak to people, you ask them the qualifying questions. Can you stop if you really want to stop? And can you stay stopped if you really want to stay stopped? And so on. Thank you. Our last question. Our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Something like, thanks for trying your best. Thanks for trying your best was my work that I've assigned you. Maybe like an employee of the century plaque would be quite nice to put.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Employee of the century, no less. Yeah, good. I hear that.
I'm joking.
Of course.
Yeah, just thank you for trying your best with my children and trying to perform my work well.
Thank you, Ollie. It's been really interesting to speak to you and to Mum about how your recoveries and how your illnesses, ran parallel, sometimes interacted with each other, sometimes knowingly interacted with each other and then not. I've really got a lot out of this, to shed some light onto those dynamics. And I'd like to thank you for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions.
Thank you, Silvio. It's been an absolute pleasure.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step Fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And this next bit, it's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.